Yes.
Welcome and thank you for being here today. I work with Sarah DeWitt and we developed this presentation together. And we are from the 2021 class of Master Gardeners. And this was the project that we picked to work on is Smart Yards Outreach. We're excited to share this with you because it's a program that encourages people to take small steps. You don't have to, you just have to make it better. It's not, you don't have to rip out your lawns or give up your, whatever you're doing. It's looking at how you can make your home and yard smarter. And it's an approachable program. And we hope that you'll walk away ready to certify your yard. Have any of you certified your yard as a smart yard? Because we didn't, when we looked on the dashboard, Andrea and me yesterday, we didn't see anybody in the Roane County Master Gardeners.
This is our first introduction to it, right?
Okay. Right. So,
Maybe
it worked before. Huh?
Sometimes you have to use the arrow key on the computer. So.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Maybe not.
There you go. N works. So why do you have a smart yard in the first place? The elements that make up a Tennessee smart yard are things that take a little thought and benefit our families, neighbors, and the community in lasting ways. Beyond the fundamental sense that having a smart yard is good for our environment, we want to help you consider why this is personally important to you. For us, it's cultivating beauty, gathering outdoors with friends and family, supporting pollinators and wildlife, growing good food, enjoying our lakes and rivers, and leaving the place better than we found it. Growing good food. Whatever your motivation is, and you can make it your own, and change it as you need to. You've got some flyers. There are, if you go to the website, there's a yardstick that you can see what items what action items you can pick. And the program is organized around 9 fundamental principles that are listed on your handouts. And you can figure out what you want to concentrate on, and each action item has been assigned a value of inches. So for instance, under reduce, reuse, recycle, you'll earn 2 inches for leaving your grass clippings on your lawn when you mow. As you implement these actions, you'll begin to accumulate these inches. And in order to get your yard certified as a smart yard, you need to accumulate 36 inches because 36 inches is a yard. As a smart yard. So we're going to go. You need to accumulate 36 inches because 36. And give you an example, or several examples maybe, for each principle. The first principle we're going to talk about is right plant, right place. And this is about the importance of planning what you want in your space. a helpful start with two of the item actions unlisted under this principle is to write out your objectives. So you've got the space in the yard, write out your objectives and create a sketch of your yard. Objectives can help you clarify what you want. I mean, if you plan what you want ahead of time, then you can leave space for what you would need afterwards, for instance. You might want a vegetable garden, and you might want to consider how close you want it to your front door so you can, you know, pick herbs and veggies and stuff and take them in. Whatever you want, really. Space for what you would need afterwards, for instance. For us, using ecological sound practices, how close you want it can mean different things. For Sarah, it meant, you know, getting a battery-powered lawnmower and adding a compost bin and planning out a space for a rain barrel. I actually already had a worm bin, but I added a compost bin and I added an extra rain barrel. So whatever your objectives are, write them out and see what you want. So think about the views from your house. Think about what you already have. Think about, you know, noise, sun, dampness, things like that. So you can tailor what you put in your yard to that space that you have already, because you don't want to take a really dry space and try to make it a wet space. You know, that takes a lot more effort than planning for it to be a dry space, for instance. You want to look at drainage, you know, how things flow and what your long-term goals are. There are things you might not want to do right away, but you might want to keep in mind. So if you kind of write down all of these, then you can have a space for them that you can implement when the time comes, and you don't have to change everything around to do that. Once you've laid out your plan, it's time to pick your plants for your space. Right plants or plants you enjoy and that have the appropriate siting, sun, water, etc. So with roses and peonies, they're going to struggle in shade and without good drainage, for instance. Most plants are much less disease prone when you have good airflow. So you keep that in mind and pick varieties that suit your needs. So pick the variety of crepe myrtle that's the size you want it to be, rather than having to prune the tree to fit the size later. And while you're about it, pick disease-resistant varieties of plants. You know, you can pick a rose, for instance, that you really don't need to spray that much or take that much care of it. And there are other roses that are really, really, really picky, and you really need to take care of them a lot. So pick varieties that are disease resistant. Wrong plants can be ones you have in the wrong place, too little sun, too much water, and things like that. But they can also be invasive plants. I actually planted this tricolor Hutunia in my garden, and I spent so much time digging it up because it just, oh, and it smells too. And so, you know, besides anything else, invasives take a lot of time and effort to control. If I could just have the time that I put into that back. But the thing is, they still sell it in nurseries. Yeah, Hutunia and Bradford pear, burning bush, butterfly bush. You can find it in any nursery you go to. Besides taking effort to manage, it also crowds out natives in the environment. And you do want to go with natives whenever you can. There's always a non-invasive species to replace what, if you were set on getting a Bradford pear-like look in your yard, there's always a non-invasive species that you can choose, and possibly even a native choice that'll give you the look that you desire. For instance, this is a serviceberry, and it really nicely replaces a Bradford pear. It has 3 seasons of interest: the spring bloom, autumn color, and edible berries. This is an American beautyberry. It has edible berries, but I have to qualify that by saying that I went and tasted one of these berries because it said it was edible, and it's really bitter. So I'm told that birds really leave it to last resort. And there's one ornithologist friend of mine who said she has a beautyberry in her garden, and when the birds get to start to eating beautyberries, she puts food out. But they look gorgeous. I mean, they really look brilliantly nice in the wintertime. And it holds those purple berries all through winter, even after it's lost its leaves. I'm planting these as a replacement to Chinese privet that I cut down. And the other advantage of not having Chinese privet is that I did not know this, but that was what my spring allergies were all about. And now that I cut those, I had a huge Chinese privet out front and one out the back deck. And when I cut those 2 down, I don't have spring allergies. It's easiest if you remove invasives early. So it's best to see if you can recognize these species and remove them when they're small and before they become established. Privet, for example, you can just pull up. They're easy to pull up when they're small. Yeah, but I have to warn you, there are a lot of them, because once those berries fall, there is just a ton of privet under the ones you removed.
So how do you keep the birds from eating the berries in your neighbor's yard and then coming and roosting in your yard and taking them out?
I find privet, I find butterfly bush in my vegetable garden all the time, and I don't have anything there, and it is birds that come and do that. And so you just have to keep an eye out and pull it up. It's not like your vegetable garden is completely taken over with privet. It's usually just one plant or one sapling that comes up. So if you pull it up right away, it pretty much does it. But yeah, you have to be a bit vigilant. The second principle of smart yards is managing soils and mulch. Covering your soil helps prevent erosion and allows rainwater to reach plants and be filtered through the soil before it goes into your storm drains and back into the Tennessee River or your closest waterway. The thing that you want to do is keep the water in your yard as much as possible. And basically, if you keep the water in your yard, you don't have storm surges as much either. And you don't drain all the stuff from your yard into the rivers. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to how you protect your soil from erosion. You can mulch it. This bed was one that Sarah had, where she had cleared it for a garden bed, but she didn't know what she wanted exactly in it, and she hadn't decided. So she threw out a cut flower seed mix to keep the soil in place and have something from eroding it and give the weeds a little competition. I think she is planning on converting this into a perennial bed at some point. Another idea is a native ground cover like wild ginger, which provides soil protection. It's a lovely plant. I really like native ginger, and it keeps weeds at bay. Turfgrass also protects soil. It filters and it holds water. I have zoysia in my yard in a smallish area, and basically about 3 hours after it rains and the sun comes out, you can sit on it because it just sucks in the water. Yeah? One of the goals mentioned in Sarah's sketch was to conduct a soil test, which is a prime recommendation of the UT extension for your yard. This is a key step to fertilizing appropriately. It may seem a bit expensive to get 4 soil samples for $60. It's $15 a test. However, consider how much you spend on amendments that you might not even need. Most of the time, you really don't need that much in the way of amendments, soil amendments and fertilizer. But if you do a soil test, you know exactly what you need. If this particular test, she had it done for her lawn. And so they told her exactly what to add to get her lawn to grow appropriately. Okay, when you fill out the soil test request, you actually tell them what you wanted to grow there. If it's, say, vegetables or lawn or perennials, and they will pretty much tell you what to add that's appropriate for that. For instance, if you decided you want to have blueberries, you would get a very different recommendation than for lawn. Your extension agent can help you with these, interpreting these results if necessary. The other thing is, and this was something that I did not catch on, it didn't occur to me. Don't fertilize before it rains heavily. I mean, I always thought, you put in your fertilizer and it got watered in, but look at where it is. And if the water is actually draining off, your fertilizer just goes down the drain and goes straight into whatever waterway is attached to your storm drain. Yeah. So if it's just a light sprinkle, yeah, that's fine. But if it's going to rain and they predict a heavy rain, don't fertilize before it rains. Yeah. It does need, most fertilizers do need moisture to activate them, but it's better done after rains. So then you don't have the fertilizer running off, and then you have to reapply it because it's not there anymore for you to use. And use as little fertilizer as you can. The fourth principle is to water efficiently. So even though we see 50 inches of rain a year in Tennessee, the last 2 months, we saw practically nothing before the last week or so. Rain gauges are easy visuals to remind you whether you need to water, especially when you leave town for a week, you can come back and just look at your rain gauge and say, oh, it's been dry. Or, oh, it's been, it's rained a lot. I don't need to do anything. In the yardstick, there's one big project in this principle, which is to install and use a rain barrel. You can get various models of rain barrel. There are, in Knox County, there's the city of Farragut, where I live, has a rain barrel project, and you can buy them, and they come with all the doodads that you need to convert it into a watering system. And a couple of things to keep in mind: you want the rain barrel high so that it's got pressure for the water to flow out and water your plants. So you might set it up on a couple of cement blocks or something to raise it. The benefit of this water capture system is that you get to water your plants for free. Yeah. And keep it from going into the storm drains. Really, you want to keep the water on your property as much as possible. And gardeners always, there's always something to do with the water. Plants always grow better when they're appropriately watered. This is actually one of my favorite Smart Yards action items because it's so easy to do and it's so impactful. So this is a case of, this was done by Tom Cook at Oregon State. In this case, the grass was mowed to 1/2 inch. You can see how far down the roots go. That was mowed to 1 inch. That was mowed to 2 inches. Now, when you mow it to 2 inches, look at how far down the roots go and how much root there is. So that gives you two things. One is that it sucks in the water because, when it rains, there's roots that are aerating the soil. So it just gathers all the water. That makes the lawn much less prone to dying out when for the 2 months that we didn't have rain, my zoysia was not watered at all. And it rained and it just greened up. The other thing you get from having your grass taller, I actually have it taller than 2 inches just because it's nice to walk on if it's, tall and soft. The other thing that happens is it shades out weeds. So there are much fewer weeds in your lawn than if you had it really short and stubby. There's different heights recommended, but I think taller is not a problem. I mean, up to 4 inches is kind of like really not a problem. But the difference between 1 inch and 2 inches is quite dramatic. The next principle is to manage yard pests. And who doesn't love the Japanese beetle? One of the simplest things you can do in your yard to manage pests is to spend time in it. So you appreciate the smells and odors of your flowers, fruits, whatever you planted. But it also means while you enjoy your space, it means that you can notice what's going on in your garden. And if you notice what's going on, you can do something about it proactively early. This was a sunny day, but it was a bumblebee day. There's actually 3 bumblebees on that passion flower. But look around and see what you see on your tomato plants. Maybe there's a hornworm, which birds are eating what seeds of what plants. How are your rose leaves doing? Do they need to be attended to? Look for pests, diseases, and controls. So the more time you spend in and around your yard, the easier it will be to spot issues before they become large problems. Notice if it's particularly dry, for instance. That's something that's easy to notice if you're out there. But if you're not out there, you can sometimes just forget about it and you come back and you go, oh my God, what happened? When dealing with pests, mind that you don't kill pollinators. The U.S. Wildlife and Fish and Wildlife Service just listed the bumblebee as an endangered species, which is sad. They're just such fun little things. You don't need to resort to a pesticide unless there's an infestation. For instance, if you've got a ton of aphids, you can spray it off with water, off your hose, and then knock them off with a water spray. And otherwise, let the ladybugs and lacewings find them. Now, if you actually spray whatever, neem generally is a common, and so to remove all your aphids, there is nothing for the ladybugs and lacewings to come by. I mean, there's no food for them, so they will not stay in your garden. So it's a kind of a balance. You have to have some food for the beneficial bugs to come and eat. So you don't want sort of a pristine bug-free garden. You want something where it's in balance and everything's taking care of everything else. So you don't have to do as much. Yeah. So grow plants, flowers, for instance, that have flowers, for instance, that attract natural enemies for pest populations. They'll also attract pollinators. If you see a infestation of tomato hornworms, you can, if there's a few of them, you may pick them off. If there are not too many, you may leave it and see if it gets parasitized by a braconid wasp. Once a braconid wasp has laid eggs in that hornworm, and this is the one that is a parasitized hornworm, it doesn't do any more damage. And you've just have a whole bunch of braconid wasps to take care of your hornworms in future cycles. When you do need to control, go to letting the pest be controlled naturally, like that. If it's a bigger issue, use physical methods, picking up bugs and putting them in soapy water. Biological controls like BT for cabbage worms and things like that. Pheromone lures, traps, etc. And use pesticides only as a last resort. Also remember that healthy plants can deal with few pests much easier than plants that are struggling already for other reasons. The next is reduce, reuse, recycle. We've all heard of these, but you think of paper, glass, metal, plastic is a standard one. But the same principles apply in your yards as well, in your garden. Repurpose things that are laying around in your garden, or laying around, repurpose them in your garden. If you put down newspaper, for instance, before you put down mulch, it really suppresses weeds to an alarmingly effective degree. I needed to just put, spent plants somewhere, and I had a cage, and that was from rocks that were delivered because we were building a rock wall. And I just used the cage to put the stuff in. You don't need to go out and buy specific things for, Of course, if you wanted a permanent compost bin, you would. But, and that's where we come into compost. So I had this thing, I was thinking, well, what if you didn't compost? I mean, as gardeners, we want compost because it's lovely stuff to, put in your beds, and the plants grow really well in it. But what if you didn't compost? Maybe you didn't garden that much and you don't really need the compost. If you let it lay around, it will decay. So I figured, okay, why, if it decayed in a landfill, how is that so horrible? But it turns out it is, because any compostable material that goes in a landfill, it decomposes anaerobically because it's, really jam-packed in there and there's no oxygen. And when it decomposes anaerobically, you get methane, not carbon dioxide. So anytime you have stuff composting, you will get carbon dioxide because it took in the carbon dioxide going in when the plants grew. And so when it composts, it does give off carbon dioxide. However, if you put it in a landfill, you get methane instead of carbon dioxide, which is 25 times worse a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So you really, even if you don't particularly need the compost, you can have a bin and just throw it in. And if you just sort of even let it lay around in a part of your backyard that you're not using, it will compost, it will break down and decompose, and you don't have to do anything about it. If you want stuff to go faster, you want something that's at least a yard on the side, it's not difficult. It just has to be big enough so that the center of it gets warmer and decomposes faster. Yeah, because if it's smaller than a yard on a side, the middle never gets to the appropriate dampness or, have the environment for microbes to break it down. And then you can do something like a rotating barrel that produces compost like super fast, and it's right by our deck, and it really doesn't even, we don't even notice any smells from it at all. Yeah. And it keeps the critters from getting in the bins and stuff. So what you put in your compost is any plant material, food scraps, and paper. What better way to get rid of sensitive documents? And just no oil, because it slows down decomposing. And you don't want, notable exceptions are you don't want invasive plants that will grow in your compost. And you don't want diseased plants or anything that you've sprayed pesticides on. Because what you put in your compost is what you get out. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Weed seeds, disease, toxic plants, invasives, everything except oils, dairy, meat, anything that has oil in it, really. If you add a little bit of compost, a little bit of soil to your compost, it gets it kick-started. There are microbes in the soil. If you already have a compost bin going, you don't have to worry about it. It's already got, just leave a little bit of compost in there, just a handful sort of thing. And we have a link at the end where there's a discussion of what you can put in your compost and what you need to do and so on and so forth. Most of these, though, is how to make it decompose faster, not decompose at all, because just left on its own, it'll be fine. If you don't have space for a compost bin, a worm bin's very good at, it is an excellent idea, and you can have it in your garage, or, it's not really a problem. Our next set of items is related to stormwater runoff. It's generated from rain, snowmelt that flows over impervious surfaces and gets into your and building rooftops, for instance, and it gets into your storm drains instead of staying on your property. Because it matters, because when water doesn't soak into the ground, it doesn't get all the filters, the dirt, that, whatever chemicals, debris, the stuff from your roof. And it doesn't benefit our gardens either. Our goal here is to capture as much of the water and keep it as on your property as you can.
What's the picture on the right?
It's a permeable pathway. So there are these things that you can buy.
Some type of worm?
It's a plastic cell thing that you can put down, and then you put gravel on top of it, and it's a drivable surface. So you can actually have a driveway made of that. And what's that?
We just did that this weekend in the
Yeah.
airport area.
Yeah, and so the water then doesn't flow down your driveway, it just goes into the ground. And you can put a permeable, so the way you do it is you put down this weed cloth. It's actually more, generally I don't like weed cloth because you just have bits and pieces of weed cloth everywhere after a few years. But since this is a permanent installation, there's this fairly dense weed cloth that you can put down that really does keep the weeds down. And then you put down the plastic cell thing and then cover it up with gravel. And it's a permanent driveway that drains all the water directly into the ground. Right? And it's actually not super, there are more expensive ways to do it as well, but this is a not super expensive way that means it's something that you can take on and do. And it's a good way, especially for pathways, you know, between your vegetable gardens, for instance, where you don't necessarily want grass because then you have to mow between the beds. Yeah. And mowing less is always great as far as I'm concerned. One time Sarah was, you know, went out and she saw her husband like taking the soapy water from the washing the car to pour it directly down the drain. And she's like, no, just pour it on the grass. It's not going to do anything to the grass and it'll filter out by the time it gets in, or just stay there, you know, and soap it'll break down. So, but it's, you know, it's things like that where it has a huge impact, not pouring it directly into the storm drain, but if you don't think of it, it's just something that's really simple to do. You just have to think about it a bit. Another simple way to figure out, to deal with stormwater runoff is to redirect it into your garden beds. So if you have, you know, whatever comes down your downspout, you just let it go into where you want it to go. I have one downspout going into a bog garden, and I have a pond as well, but I have that. So the irises stay, you know, boggy and wet, and I don't have to do anything about it, you know, because it's just there. So you have to kind of, if you've got the first picture where it's obviously draining into some part of your garden, you're good. The second picture where it's draining into somewhere underground, you kind of have to dig a little bit more and see where it's going to. A lot of times it goes, you know, out to the street, and you really don't want to do that. The third one is obviously going to the street. Well, you want to keep it in your yard. If you can identify where the water flows at, make sure it's not to your driveway or the street, you've done the job. And this is a graphic created by the city of Milwaukee, talking about how you might, you know, deal with it. This downspout connected to the sewer system, I don't think happens anymore. I don't think it's, they don't do it anymore. But yeah, keep the water in your yard. Spending time in your yard was, you know, to see about insects and growing and plants and stuff. Also means you can notice what's happening with respect to wildlife. We love having birds fly around our place. We have, you know, this year we had phoebes nesting above our light, you know, our front porch light. I was like, it's very cool. And they made a nest off of moss they got off the stones in the pond. And they had this like superb artistry of, you know, moss nest. It's gorgeous. I have a picture on my phone, I can show you. you've got to decide, again, this is in your plan, what you want to attract. You want birds, turtles, salamanders, toads, rabbits, I don't know, butterflies, bees. And you may not want to encourage some creatures. If you have a vegetable garden, rabbits don't play very well with your vegetable garden, because I have a very fat, well-fed rabbit. But basically, if you have a vegetable garden, consider putting up a fence before you even start, because if you keep them out and they don't get into the habit of coming there, they'll stay out. They're not going to jump through hoops to get there when they don't know what's there in the first place. And so if you are doing a vegetable garden, it's a good idea to put up it doesn't have to be a high fence. It's something you can even walk over, but it does have to be like a 2-foot fence. So shelter includes, shrub layers and tree layers at various heights, because animals make homes at all sorts of different heights, and different birds do it at different heights as well. And they need this space just to be. So one of the things, water can be just a bird bath, or it could be a pond. You might live on a waterway. There's a lot of waterways around this part of the state. Just remember to keep your water fresh or in motion, or have fish to prevent disease and mosquitoes. You can also prevent mosquitoes by installing a bat house, which is on my list of I want one. Yeah, and they're very specific instructions on how a bat house should be, so pay attention to those. They have to face the morning sun, because you don't want fungal diseases in your bats. So there's specific things that you have to look up, but it's a very skinny sort of space that bats live in. It's kind of fun, pretty cool. Wildlife, food for wildlife can mean leaving your rose hips, for things to eat, like sunflower seeds, coneflower seeds, that sort of thing. And all of these things that you're doing make it really nice for you to be in, as well as the wildlife, right? I mean, a pond or a stream is really nice, but watching the birds interact with it is just kind of really fun. Yeah. And varied landscaping in general is more visually interesting, and colorful and scented flowers make the garden better for us, birds, etc. So this final principle is protecting the water's edge. It applies most directly to you if you live on the water. It's a little bit more specialized, so we encourage you to engage with these inches if you live on a property, but you might need to get with your extension agent and see specifically what you can do depending on how your property is situated. So we would like to make you aware of this URL, and I will send you all these links. I'll send them to Jessica in an email, and she can, distribute to all of you. But you're putting a name on that list makes you think about how your property functions within the larger watershed, because it's very strange. I live on a ridge, and on my side, I go into the Clinch River, but on the other side, they do not. So it's kind of, it's interesting. Now for the fun part. So there are these, we've been talking to you about thinking about what you're already doing, starting to generate ideas about what actions you might take to make your yard more enjoyable. And well, you've already taken the first step to, come and listen to this and get some information. And there's the website at the top. Again, I'll send it to you in the links. Has a whole bunch of information on how to do your certification. It has several yardstick options. I like the interactive Excel yardstick just because it keeps tab, when you finish something, you can keep tabs for your, from a Master Gardener point of view, we have in Knox County that a thing that you can get 10 hours of service that count towards your service hours, 5 for continuing education and 5 for general service hours for certifying your yard as a smart yard. I don't know if you have a setup to do that. But that's what the Knox County Master Gardeners do, because we want all the Master Gardeners to have their yard certified as well. And then the website has a lot more information. Each one has a video. Each of these 9 principles that I talked about has a in-depth video on it. And I found it useful to watch one video when I was addressing when I was doing the water part and I was hooking up my rain barrels. I went and watched the water part, that particular video, so I could keep in mind what I want, how I wanted to do it, and how I wanted to plan to do it as well. Because like I said, if you have your rain barrel on the ground, you'll have very little flow coming out, to empty a rain barrel. If you kind of put it on a pedestal like this high, you can water quite a large area with your rain barrel, stuff like that. So the videos are very useful as well. You are probably doing a lot of these things in your yard, and it's a accumulation of small efforts. Even if you're not going to certify your yard right now, it makes sense to do a few things that help you get along. For instance, leave your grass clippings on the lawn and mow it high. Yeah, mulch your grass clippings and leave the grass high. You've got inches there, and you can do that tomorrow, the next time you mow, right? And it's not that difficult. So it's a lot of them are little things you do that really have an outsized impact. The certificate, and when you do get your yard certified, you can get yourself a sign. And I'm told that there are properties that with the sign that are getting quite a lot of airplay, like the realtors say, this is a smart yard, stuff like that. But it's very accessible, the program. It's not prescriptive. You don't have to do anything. I mean, the privet, cutting down the privet, for instance, I cut down the 2 biggest privets, but the ones between myself and my neighbor, I'm going slower on that, because if I cut down those privets, I will see their I'll see their bare wall. So I want to do something that I have plants in place before I cut down the privets there, for instance. But I will have, in the meanwhile, to keep track of the seedlings that come up and pull them up, because there will be a lot of seedlings right around where but it's a little bit further from the house, and I'm going to take my time dealing with it, because, I don't want an eyesore in the meanwhile. This is an actionable effort. Doing a smart yard is an actionable effort that has lasting impact on the environment, and benefits for the environment. So even a single yard can make a difference. Like 1 yard, an average house, you have 100,000 gallons of rooftop water retained if you let it go into your yard instead of going down to the drains. But 75 houses and you got 7 million gallons that don't give you a storm surge. Yeah. So probably you've noticed that as the density of housing builds up, you get a lot more storm surges. And it's all from the fact that the water is running directly onto the street and into the storm drains instead of being retained on that land. So these are all the links, and I will email them to Jessica, and she can email them to all of the members. And so they're readily available, and then you start your certification process. Thanks for coming today. And can I answer any questions?
You mentioned the bat cage or house, whichever. So would you put that on a pole that's standing alone, or could you put it in a tree, or would you put it on a?
You can put it on a standalone pole or on a tree. The direction it faces is important. It has to get the morning sun.
If you put a pole that's got a bird house on it already.
I think that's fine.
It just, okay.
So the one thing that I learned through someone else about bat houses is wherever you put it, there's gonna be guano. So pay attention to that.
Yeah, so I was gonna put it like right above where my roses are growing, and the roses are gonna love the guano.
Okay.
But you don't wanna put it in the middle of your deck, for instance,
Or a
because,
sidewalk.
yeah.
I had some bats that built a nest up and I had a can light on my walkway outside just over my deck, and they built a nest up in the can.
Can make a nest.
They
Once the
do.
nest is established, you're not supposed to disturb it.
But yeah, so you wanna, all of these things, you wanna kind of look around and gauge where you might wanna put things and think through what the consequences would be, because yeah, you don't want to deal with bat guano on a regular basis.
There's so many good things about having bats around.
Yeah, it's my neighbors 2 doors down, they have bats in their, like, in the side of the house. And it's by a bed that they have, so that's fine. It's the guano is not a problem.
It's outside.
It's outside. And when you sit on the deck, you can be as mosquito ridden as anything, but they don't get single mosquito. You don't get a single mosquito bite on their deck.
We don't have mosquitoes.
Yeah. So
you mentioned in Farragut that they have a program where you can buy rain barrels from them. I guess it's cheaper price than if you were to.
I think it was $60 for a rain barrel, but you can get on Marketplace. Oh yeah, Marketplace is a great.
We did a workshop on rain barrels, and there's the material about how to build your own rain barrel was on there. So we can get that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that link too.
And but the Farragut one was about the same price roughly, but they had all the parts already done, and you just had to screw in the tap and so on and so forth.
But you were mentioning Marketplace.
Yes, I was looking for that big compost bin. I kind of decided I wanted a big one because I wanted to make my own leaf mold. And so that meant, putting a lot of leaves in there, and so that I could mulch all the beds. And it was like $700 or something. It was expensive. And I was telling somebody about it, and she said, look on Facebook Marketplace. And I did, and it was like $80.
Wow.
And somebody had one and they wanted to get rid of it. And you're like, oh. I'm good with that. Yeah, if price is right, does the same thing. But rain barrels, for instance, if you look, there are a lot of 55-gallon drums, food grade, 55-gallon blue drums that you can get on Marketplace for $10, $15. And then you just need a faucet, you need a drill and a faucet and stuff. And they are, yeah, it's, and the blue barrels that you get, the one I showed you of this painted barrel, those are all blue barrels that they have in Knox County anyway, a contest in the fall every year. It might be coming up soon, or might have just happened, where there's a contest of painting these barrels. So you can get this blue barrel and paint it whatever, however you want. And it's kind of cool. Anything else? Well, it was great to talk to you all. And I hope you guys put yourselves on the map in the fall every year.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Coming up soon, or might have just happened.